Trick or treat, smell my feet. Watch out for the Halloween hair.
Welcome to the Garden Angelus, where we talk about flowers, veggies, and all the best dirt. I'm Dee Nash from Guthrie, Oklahoma, where I garden on 7.5 acres out in the country.
And I'm Carol Michael from Indianapolis, Indiana. I have a suburban garden measured in square feet, about a third of an acre.
We call ourselves Garden Angelus because we are evangelists for gardening. We love gardening, and we want you to love it too.
Yes, we do. And we aren't afraid to spill the beans and tell all of our gardening secrets, the good, the bad, and even the ugly. But that's enough of who, what, when, where. Let's move on to this week's episode. Hello, Dee.
Hello, Carol. You should explain about the Halloween hair.
Well, on my blog, there's a story about the Halloween hair, and he goes around to various gardens on Halloween night. And I will try to find a link to the actual story so that people can read it.
Yeah, it's a cute story.
So anyway, how's your garden, Dee?
It's, I'm getting it prepped for winter time. So Bill and I got all of the elephant ears and other tropical plants out of the pond, and I put them all out in the greenhouse after cutting them back. And I actually put that on my story on Instagram, but I guess I could put it up on YouTube. We'll see if I get that done. Let's see. And I put them all in potting soil. I cleaned out the greenhouse, which was a huge chore.
Yep.
But you want to start with a clean greenhouse. So I'm going to talk about that this week on my blog post. I've already decided. And Brennan came over and helped me carry some of the heavier pots. And I gathered up some seeds for you.
I'm excited.
And I'm mailing them. Yeah, I even got them in an envelope, Carol, with stamps on it.
That's half the battle.
For me, that's huge, right?
Yeah.
And so I took some more cuttings. I watered everything, and everything's going pretty well.
That is awesome.
How's that? How's yours?
Well, it's the second spring around here because the autumn crocuses are blooming. They're pretty and they're purple. And I should really write a blog post and put them out there because they are unusual for people to see.
They are. The only time I've ever seen autumn crocuses was when I was up in the Pacific Northwest, and we went to an island, and I want to say it was Friday Harbor was the area we landed on. And we went with my friend Wanda and her husband, Lindsay, and they were everywhere in this harbor. And I was like, what? They're crocuses and they bloom now. So that was pretty cool.
It is cool. And I really should get some, or maybe I'm going to transplant some of the ones in the back to the front. Because, when you have something kind of weird like that, people walk by and they're thinking, girl's got magical powers. Or what is she growing now? But
exactly.
It is like a second spring or maybe a first spring. Some of the bulbs do send up foliage this time of year, like grape hyacinths and starflowers. And people are like, oh no. It's like, no, don't worry about it.
Right. They're supposed to do that. Yeah.
So I spent an hour a day in the garden. I ended up moving around a bunch more edging. It's a long story. But a good story. I mean, I cleaned out a bunch of the vinca, and it sort of left this area as you come in the gate sort of undefined. And I thought I need to put edging there. And I had enough to put edging so that my little path from the gate into the garden is better defined.
Well, that's good. That's awesome.
But you know what? Friday, I couldn't go out and garden because it misted all day long. It never rained, but it misted all day long.
Why couldn't you go out there in the mist?
It was wet. It was sopping wet.
Really wet. Okay.
Really, really wet. So I made up a new rule for my little chart. And that is if it's sopping wet and you can't go out, you still get an X.
Okay. It's you doing the chart, so you can make up any rules you want.
And, yesterday, actually, we got 1.7 inches of rain, and it pretty much fell all day. So I get X for yesterday, too.
Yeah, you do. You get an X any day you want one, or a gold star.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
So that takes us to our first quote.
It does. There is a child in every one of us who is still a trick-or-treater looking for a brightly lit front porch. Robert Brault.
I like that. It's true. We're going to our friend's house on Sunday. Isn't Halloween Sunday this year?
I believe it is.
Yeah. So we're going to go there, and they get lots of trick-or-treaters. When you live out in the country, you don't get any. And so I go to other people's houses for Halloween because I really enjoy that. So
really, because I'm just like, oh, trick-or-treaters, how long does this last? Are there rules here that,
You just turn off your porch light.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I'm like, I don't want any, oh well.
So
I never thought I'd be that cranky old lady who didn't want any trick or treaters, but I'll have some candy. And if they come, they come. That's fine. We don't get that many.
Oh, apparently this neighborhood is very, very busy. It's a hot spot. So I'm excited. So our flower this week is, you picked it out, spooky plants, plants with black flowers or dark purple leaves. And there's a whole book on that. There's a couple of books on it, but we linked to one in particular called Black Plants, 75 Striking Choices for the Garden by Paul Bonine. And so let's talk a little bit about dark colored leaves. There are some new perennial hibiscus from Proven Winners that have really dark leaves and great big blooms. Ooh. And I actually put 2 of them in my garden this year. And of course, yesterday when I was working on our notes, I forgot to link to those. So you can talk about something else for a minute and then I'll go find them.
Well, I was going to say, I actually have one of the violas that I have is called Black Delight.
Uh-huh.
And some of the violas have stopped blooming because I am purposely letting them go to seed because I want the seed to maybe germinate.
Mm-hmm. You want them to spread.
Black Delight. I mean, these are dark, dark flowers. And here's the thing about these really dark leaves.
Yes.
I don't really want them in the summertime, but when fall comes, you want that sort of dark, creepy feeling sometimes.
See, I like dark leaves any time of the year, but my kids would tell you that I like all that kind of, I really do kind of like creepy flowers because I like all the dark daylilies too. The dark purple daylilies like Bella Lugosi.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of them. And so Killer is another one. Okay. I found the dark foliage, at least one of them. And this one is Summerific Perfect Storm. And it is a beautiful, beautiful plant. And I bought it from Bustani because he had some. And I put it in this border right outside my door. So
sounds beautiful.
It does. And the nice thing about, do those work where you live too? Perennial hibiscus?
Yeah, they do.
I thought so. I thought they were hardy there. So people always think they're dead here because in the early spring, you cut them all the way back and they look dead and they are dead to the ground, but they're ground hardy. And I've never had one not come back. So we'll link to Summerific Perfect Storm. And then they have another one that has a red bloom too. So that's just to get you started. And then of course, black elephant ears are a great plant to use.
They are.
They look really great in pots, especially with lime green. So if you can find a lime green one and it looks really good. There were some dahlias that came out this year with dark, dark foliage. I bought them, fell for it. And then midsummer they died off and I put something else in their place in the fall. So I was going to say that about containers. Containers are unpredictable and don't feel like whatever you put in there in the spring is going to last all the way through the summer.
That's true.
And sometimes what you put in the summer doesn't last all the way through the summer. Just pluck that baby out and put something else in. It's, $5.99. Costs less than a coffee.
The classic black leaf dahlia, darling, is Bishop of Llandaff.
Bishop of Llandaff?
Yeah, that one too.
It is. And his children, which is always funny to me because I'm like, who is this bishop with all these children? But anyway, I digress.
So I should have done a little bit more homework for this. I have some dark leaf beard's tongue. I can't remember what the name of it is, but I have some dark leaf beard's tongue, which is kind of nice, but it sort of disappears.
Well, there are several varieties. Yeah, there are several varieties that have dark leaves. One in particular has pink flowers, and I can't think of the name of it right now, but sorry, guys, we do the best we can. Sometimes we can't remember every name of every plant. But if you go by that book about black plants, he has a bunch of listings of them. And they've done even more research since then to make black plants very, very popular. They are nice. They do good contrast in the garden.
They do. And you don't want a whole garden full of these black leaf plants because then I think it's just not a look I would want. It's just not a look I want.
But you want to, and I thought of one of the beard's tongues. One of them is Midnight Masquerade, and that's a Proven Winners one. And then
Yeah.
there's another one that I have too. And they're both dark leaves. And I will say that the blooms, because they're really small, are very striking against those dark leaves, which I appreciate.
Yeah.
And there's Husker's red too, which is kind of dark.
So, I don't seek out black leaf plants, but sometimes they seem interesting. That's all I'm going to say.
I think sometimes they seek us out. You also link to another book, and people can go and to our show notes, which you can find on Buzzsprout, or if you're on your phone, you can touch the down button. We pull up the actual podcast and touch the down button, and it expands and we'll show you where the show notes are. But if you go to our show notes and you click on it and you buy something, then we get credit for it. So another one is Wicked Plants, The Weed That Killed Lincoln's Mother and Other Botanical Atrocities, which is by Amy Stewart. And when I went to find this link, Carol, I didn't put it in our show notes. But the funny part was there is now a coloring book.
Oh, I'm sure, because this thing is beautifully illustrated. And
It is.
There's actually, I think there's some like a traveling show that goes around to various botanical gardens and other similar venues, which
there is. I've seen that show and it was really good.
I have not seen the show. If
really
it came
good.
to Indianapolis, I would probably go see it.
You should go see it because it's very clever the way they did it. And then there was a whole package of seeds. I know there was for Amy's drink, series, the book she did on botanical drinks. But I think there was also one for some poisonous plants, but they have to be careful because there are a lot of plants that are poisonous.
They are.
I'm always like, people ask me this question all the time. Well, is that poisonous to dogs or cats? And you know what I say?
What do you say?
Probably. So no, really what I do say is I say, go Google it, because the truth is I assume my dog is smart enough not to eat the plants in my garden. And if he's not, well, let's say it this way. He's been smart enough so far.
It comes from a long line of dogs who managed not to eat the plants in the garden.
Yeah, I understand if you're someone who is really, really worried about your animals, especially indoors, because cats indoors sometimes go nuts and eat your plants. But most of the time, I don't look into that. I will say that cocoa mulch, you should not put that on your gardens if you have dogs, but it's really expensive anyway. So don't put cocoa mulch on there anyhow.
That's right.
Do you want to do the next quote? Are we done with this topic?
Yeah, because anyway, Halloween week is a good time to pull out your Black Plants book and your Wicked Plants book and,
Yeah.
kind of just dive in to the dark side of things, I guess.
Dive into the creepiness. Because, and you could also read mysteries where people are killed with plants like oleander.
Yeah. Which would be, or, like a lot of the Agatha Christie mysteries.
Yeah.
There's a lot of plant death in there.
There's a lot of poisonous plants because she was a gardener and she thought that was funny.
They're either poisonous plants or they buried the body in the garden or found the body in the garden.
Well, and that's how Amy promoted her book when that came out. She had a whole video that she did, and there was a body lying in the garden, and that was part of the shtick. It was very funny. Okay, so our next quote. A grandmother pretends she doesn't know who you are on Halloween. That's by Irma Bombeck. Wow, I wish Irma Bombeck was still around.
Yes, indeed.
She was
funny.
Much too
young.
She made me laugh.
But you know how it is with grandmas and stuff. Their little grandkids come over and they act like they have no idea who they are in those costumes.
Absolutely. And they're so scary. But mine's still too little. This will be her first year that she even understands what she is. Last year at this time, we bought her a costume and we were in the middle of the ice storm. So there was no trick-or-treating. Halloween got canceled in Oklahoma last year.
That's right.
And so we stood in the dark and took pictures of her and put it on Megan's Instagram. So go figure.
There you go.
Okay. So our veggie is rethinking the number of varieties of some veggies we grow, like tomatoes.
So how many varieties of tomatoes did you grow this year, Dee?
23.
So
it's a sickness.
I probably grew 10. And I thought that's too many. And the same thing with peppers.
Probably 10 or 12. Yeah, I grew too many.
So I thought maybe the more successful thing to do with tomatoes, for example, is to grow fewer varieties and just kind of zero in on some that just do really, really well.
Right.
So space and time are limited.
Yeah.
And then I started saying, well, I want an early tomato and a paste tomato and a red slicing tomato and a yellow slicing tomato. And then I have to have red, yellow, and black cherry tomatoes. So I got myself back to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7.
Well,
8.
at least that's down from 10. So I'm taking out all of my paste tomatoes. I am sick of planting both the two big Italian tomatoes, like San Marzano and the other one, Roma 2, Roma, whatever. They always have blossom end rot here. Sometimes San Marzano's better, but this year it was not because we had so much rain, and I'm just over them. I was looking at them outside because I haven't pulled them yet.
I grew a tomato called Amish paste, and it didn't have any blossom end rot.
I've grown it before too, and it's a good one. It's a really good heirloom.
It's skinnier than the Romas and the San Marzanos.
Yeah,
longer and skinnier.
Yeah. I can't eat as many tomatoes as I used to, and my mom doesn't really do them anymore. I used to grow some for her. So my plan is to grow a couple of determinate tomatoes, maybe. Oh, heck, I don't know what my plan is. I don't have a plan. What am I saying?
Now let's tell our listeners determinate versus indeterminate tomatoes, because that's something to know before you plant it.
It is. Determinate tomatoes stay shorter.
Yes.
And they produce their crop all at one time within a 3-week period.
Yes.
Indeterminate tomatoes can grow 6-7 feet tall, and they produce tomatoes all over the whole season. Most heirlooms are indeterminate, and a lot of hybrids are determinate. And the reason determinate tomatoes are popular in hybrids is because a lot of those hybrids were created in the beginning for the canning industry.
Right.
I know all this because I wrote that book, the 2030 something garden guide. And I went through a lot of work to try to quickly and easily explain determinate versus indeterminate. Which do you grow the most of?
Indeterminate.
Me too.
In fact, I don't really like determinate, and I was kind of annoyed with myself because of all those varieties. Actually, one of them was a determinate variety, and I thought I didn't want a determinate variety. Mm-hmm. So that one got put in a smart pot on the patio, and the others were put out in the garden. And I wasn't really all that impressed with it.
Which one did you grow?
And it could be because, I don't know, but it could be, I have to go back and look at my notes, and I do have notes on that. Maybe the tomato sensed that I was mad at it for being determinate and was sulky. I don't know, but it and I didn't get along very well. I had a few tomatoes.
So if you want to go down a rabbit hole, dear listeners, go read about Rutgers tomato. Rutgers tomato, there's like a whole article on about will the real Rutgers stand up? It's hard to get the original Rutgers. Anyway, it's quite the rabbit hole. I've been down it before. Several people swear that they have the original Rutgers tomato, which is a great mid-season tomato. But it is a good rabbit hole if you want to go and research tomatoes. Some of my favorite tomatoes, I'd say most of them are indeterminate at this point.
Indeterminate, yes. Yeah.
Because you can buy regular canning tomatoes in the store if you want those. And I don't want them.
Yeah. To that.
So I do suggest, though, if you live in Oklahoma, that you grow both hybrids and heirlooms, because sometimes the hybrids have better disease resistance, and sometimes we have a bad disease year. And so you want to have something, you want some success, because tomatoes can be quite finicky. We could have an early hot spring and then nothing sets blooms. Or you could have disease take everybody out. I've seen all of them. One thing that can really help you is by putting new potting soil in your containers, if you grow them in containers, or rotating your crops.
I rotate.
It's all the same thing. Yeah, me too.
In fact, I'm thinking, so that's where the tomatoes will go next year. I just kind of keep moving them down one. But the next one.
Yeah, that's a good way to do it. If you have 4 garden beds, 4 raised beds, you can just move them from bed to bed. And that gives some time, but don't plant another nightshade in the same spot where the tomatoes were. In other words, don't plant peppers, for example.
I don't really. Well, I try not to do that.
You don't follow that?
Well, the next bed over that they should go into is the one that has the gigantic rock in it. So there's not enough room for my tomato crops. So that's why I got to go way to the other end by the strawberries and start over there. So.
Yeah. And I started doing mine in smart pots a couple of years ago because I just want to. It's just easier. I don't really have room for all those tomatoes in my bed. But this year I'm going to grow more stuff in smart pots, and I'm going to grow fewer. I promise I'm going to grow fewer peppers. I had so many peppers. I was awash in peppers this year. I put more peppers in the freezer than you can possibly imagine.
You know what's going to happen, Dee?
What?
So this year would be what we call a good pepper year. And next year you'll plant fewer and it'll be a bad pepper year and you won't have near enough peppers and you'll be I should have planted more peppers. So then you'll plant more peppers and it'll be a good pepper year and then you'll have too many and on it'll go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth.
In other words, you're saying that gardening is not only seasonal, but unpredictable.
Pretty much.
Huh. Imagine that.
Pretty much.
I would agree with that. You want to do the next quote?
I do. The cobwebs in my house just became decorations by unknown. That's the nice thing about Halloween.
Yeah, because there are cobwebs in this house, I can promise you.
Oh, I'm sure there are here too. I just ignore them. As long as I don't walk through them, they're fine.
Yeah. Oh, but I did hear about a new spider that's down in the southeast, which scared me, but we won't talk about that right now. So on the bookshelf, we have A Garden Miscellany by Susan Staubach. And this is a book that I found at our local bookstore. I'll just tell who it is, Full Circle Books in Oklahoma City. I was in there shopping, and as a gardener does, I went and perused the gardening section. Even though I get so many gardening books, I sometimes want to lose my mind, but that's fine. This one's very sweet. I'm showing Carol the cover. She's seen it before.
It's very sweet. I don't have it.
She doesn't have it because she hasn't bought it, but it came out, I think, in 2019, and I bet it didn't get much attention because of COVID. So I'm going to give it a little attention today. This would be a really great little sweet book that would make a good gift for a gardener in your life. So if you're starting to look for your Christmas gifts, this would be a good one. It is an alphabet, so they could have called it A Garden Alphabet. But what I loved about it is that, like, for example, furniture. And I was like, really, furniture? But then she goes into all this history about the ancient Middle East and why furniture was important. And then she talks about China. And then she goes into the 19th century. So it's got a lot of history in it too. And so I think, and there's a lot of words that you wouldn't think of. One being haha, which we talked about extensively last week.
Yes.
And so it's a really, really good, it's just a really, really good little book. And it has a lot more to it than you would think of. And it has hand drawings. And the drawings, I think, are also by Susan. Nope, I'm sorry. It was illustrated by Julia Yellow. And so it was done by Timber Press. And I don't remember ever getting anything from Timber Press talking about this. And so it says on the back, do you know a folly from a haha? I actually do. I have a folly. I do not have a haha. And can an alley be pleached? And does a skep belong on a plinth? So it's not, it says answers to these questions plus a gazebo full of information, stories, and visual delights await in this charming exploration of the stuff gardens are made of. So she's a garden historian, and you can definitely tell that because each section has a history section in it. Anyway, I loved it. I thought it was beautiful.
And now I think I need it, but I have to scour my shelves to make sure that didn't suddenly sneak in here some way.
I think you would know if you had this book because it's just so beautifully illustrated.
I probably would.
And the cover's really pretty.
But you know how many gardening books?
Yeah, you do. I'm going to put it on my bookshelf where it faces out because it shows a gardener watering with a watering can and an arbor. And it does have topiary, which is not my favorite, but whatever. And ferns. It's just really, really sweet. It's a sweet book.
All right. I might have to buy that.
So is it my turn to do the quote?
Yes.
Some people are born for Halloween and some are just counting the days until Christmas. Stephen Graham Jones. Yeah, one of the people that I'm friends with on Facebook, she posted about how she wished she could put up her Christmas tree right now. So I would definitely say that she is one of those who just counts until Christmas. I'm not ready for Christmas and I'm too tired to deal with it. I've had a cold for a week. So I'm kind of excited. Let's just do Halloween.
There you go. And my nephew is one of those that like once Labor Day is over, he's ready to start getting out all the Christmas decorations for their house and everything.
It's too early, man. It's too early.
Yeah, it is too early. I'm a traditionalist. Wait till after Thanksgiving.
Me too. So since it's Halloween week, we're going to talk about a cemetery. Yeah, spooky. And so I just thought this was the coolest story. I found it quite by accident. I was out goofing around, and it has a whole team of volunteer gardeners who keep the actual graves in the Woodlands grave gardens. They keep them planted with Victorian plants. You can only use Victorian plants. And so you and I would probably think of it as a traditional cemetery where, like, after someone is buried, there's a mound of dirt, not to be too gross, but there just is. There's a mound of dirt, right? And then over time, that's covered by grass. But that's not what this cemetery is like. It has these really interesting tombs that are considered tombs in the French style, and they're also called cradle graves.
Mm-hmm.
The Victorians were creepy.
Kind of creepy.
Kind of creepy. And so you can go and see this whole video on their website, which we're going to link to. And it's in the University City neighborhood in Philadelphia. And a group of volunteers. So what happened is in the 19th century, people created these cradle graves. I'm still creeped out. And they planted beautiful plants on top of where the person was buried. Well, that's not so creepy. That's kind of nice, right? But over time, it got all weedy and gross. And a few years ago, a woman, and I should have written down her name, but a woman actually asked for volunteers to help her clean up the graves and to plant Victorian plants. And I don't think they asked for permission or anything. I think they just did it. And then it became a thing.
Yeah, she asked for 25 volunteers and 75 showed up, and now it's huge. And so this reminds me of the book that I have. I pulled it out, Grave Landscapes, the 19th Century Rural Cemetery Movement. And this woodland cemetery, along with I want to say dozens around the big cities in the 19th century, they realized they needed places to bury people, not in the center of the cities. The cities were growing. So they went to the outskirts and they planted these huge cemeteries, and they were like parks.
Right, because people would go and have picnics on the graves.
Yes.
That goes all the way back to the Roman times, because you could go and be in a cemetery and they couldn't arrest you. And so the early Christians would go and have what they called feast days, which feast days also ties into the Catholic idea that when you die and you're a saint, you have a feast day. And it's the day of your death or a day they pick, because we're Catholic and we just, arbitrarily do things. But anyway, it started out as that. And so they did the same thing in the 19th century, because cities were smoky and bustling and there wasn't any green space. So they made these cemeteries and people treated them like parks because they weren't creeped out, I guess. And so,
well, and that's where what happened in this particular cemetery with these cradle graves, people moved and died and became, they found other ways to get into green spaces. And so they fell into disrepair. And so it's really nice how they're redoing it. And it's a big deal there now.
It's a very big deal.
You have to go to a class.
Yeah, because they won't let you plant just any plants. They have to be Victorian plants. And actually they have plants when you come to plant in the spring, and you also have to keep the grapes in a certain way. It's gotten very technical. In the beginning, it was just, these are weedy and we need to fix it. Interestingly, the Woodlands was once the 18th century estate of the amateur botanist and plant collector William Hamilton, and it became a cemetery in 1840. So it's kind of a nice thing because he was already a botanist. So it already had trees, and it was a very nice space, and people are starting to use it again now as a park. And so they showed yoga on the lawn.
A lot of cemeteries in urban areas are being sort of, I want to say, reimagined as park spaces.
Discovered.
And here in Indianapolis, the big cemetery is called Crown Hill. And in the book Grave Landscapes, they have dedicated like 2 pages to its history. And it was one of the same deals, and it was considered pretty far out of town, but they picked it because it was the highest point in Indianapolis. And so
that's interesting.
Yeah. And people used to complain about how far it was to get to the Crown Hill Cemetery. And it's like, geez, I drive by it every time I go to garden club. It's not that far away, but I'm in a car.
Right. I think people used to, yeah, I think people, well, if you think about it, these were probably at the end of like cable car lines and stuff, because I know that's how Oklahoma City was. So there are places in Oklahoma City like that too, which is, it's really cool. And those graveyards are much more interesting than your average cemetery is now, where it's all about upkeep and making it easy to take care of. And I get that too. So anyway, they were our first parks.
You going to a cemetery for Halloween, Dee? You going to a cemetery?
I am
for
probably
Halloween?
not going to a cemetery for Halloween, although I guess I could. I'm just going to my friend's house, which might look, I don't know, maybe her house will look like a cemetery. You want to hear my grandmother's joke about
Well, I got
cemeteries?
one more thing to say about cemeteries.
Well, I have a joke. You want to hear my grandmother's
Well, I've got two things to say about cemeteries.
Okay, you go first.
That relate to gardening.
Okay. So is my joke.
So I know, but there are some cemeteries like Cave Hill Cemetery down in Louisville and Spring Grove Cemetery down in Cincinnati. I've actually visited these on GardenCom regional meetings because they are considered almost arboretums because of the various trees and things that they have in them.
Right.
And they can get themselves certified as arboretums. So interesting. Because, down in Louisville, that's where Colonel Sanders is buried. And she told us they had a special way to get right to Colonel Sanders' grave. Well, they have a special colored line to drive through the cemetery. You follow the red line and it'll take you to Colonel Sanders' grave. Mm-hmm. And here's what's even more interesting. I have an aunt and uncle buried in that cemetery. They're just 2 rows up from the Colonel.
That's funny. That's a funny deal. I've been to O. Henry's grave.
So I've been to Colonel Sanders' grave. This is pretty nice.
So in Asheville, North Carolina,
I have one more thing to
old
say.
Cemetery.
People leave chicken in chicken boxes, and so every day the cemetery crew has to go and clean up the Colonel's grave because people have left their Colonel Sanders chicken boxes and things there, buckets.
That's just gross.
All right, now you can go on now, Dee. I'm done, I think.
Are you finished, you think? So in Asheville, North Carolina is the Riverside Cemetery. So if you ever go to Asheville, you should go to the Riverside Cemetery because there are lots of people buried there that are really famous. O. Henry is one of them, and he's a famous author, and also Thomas Wolfe is there. And then there's a bunch of other stuff too. So Bill took me there because of O. Henry's grave. And also
very nice.
Thomas.
Well, I have one more thing to say about cemeteries at I think it's Spring Grove in Cincinnati. I hope I'm saying that right. If you want to go down at Rabbit Hole, every Memorial Day, the Irish travelers all congregate because Spring Grove years ago let them bury some of their deceased members of their family there. So it's like a gathering place for Irish travelers. That's going to send you down a rabbit hole. I am done now. You want to go on to your real rabbit hole and I'll talk about my real rabbit hole?
Well, I want to do my joke first.
Oh, okay. I apologize. Your joke. We're running way over.
This is my grandmother's joke. When I was a kid, we used to drive past the cemetery in Miami, Oklahoma. Not Miami. It's called Miami. So we used to drive past it and she'd say, "Hey, look over there." And I'd say, "What?" And she'd say, "People are just dying to get in there."
I knew you were going to say that.
And I cannot go past the cemetery without laughing every time I see one because I think
of that same joke every time I go. People are dying to get in there.
Okay, so you do your rabbit hole first.
So really I don't really have time for decent rabbit holes. I'm working on a presentation for the central region of the National Garden Clubs, which includes Indiana, Illinois, Iowa, Michigan, Minnesota, Missouri, and Wisconsin. And that's going to be on November the 1st. And my title is From Antique Hoes to Smartphones, What Do You Really Need to Garden? So I've been having to narrow it down a little bit.
Yeah, you think?
Yeah.
That's a heck of a topic.
Plus, I want to have a few surprises because it's via Zoom and I don't want everybody to click mute they will all be on mute, but just go do something for 30 minutes and then come back to see if I'm done.
You don't want to see all those empty squares where people are walking around.
Anyway, that's my rabbit hole this week. I got to get that thing done. It's almost done.
Man, you are busy. Okay, mine is Panola pansies. This one's for you, Beth Teal. So Beth Teal's one of our listeners, and she's from Tulsa, Oklahoma, and she's a huge fan of Panola pansies. And as you can tell from the name Panola, it is a mixture between a viola and a pansy, and they are a hybrid cross. So panolas have the cold hardiness and high bloom count of violas, but a larger bloom size than a pansy. I mean, larger bloom size than a viola, but not quite as large as a pansy. And so the interesting thing about this is I found this article about them in the St. Augustine newspaper. And they said, quote, a small company by the name of Waller Genetics did and created an award-winning flower forever known as the panola. History shows Waller Genetics was sold, and today the panola has been developed, improved, and expanded into many more colors and mixes by Pan American Seed. Pan American Seed, now I'm out of the quotes, is a subsidiary of Ball Horticultural Company. And Ball Horticultural talks about it on their website too, because they own Pan American Seed. And I saw a bunch of these when I was at California Spring Trials. There's a guy, and he's with Pan American Seed, and he loves pansies. I mean, it's his reason for being, I think. Oh, you should talk to him, Carol.
I should.
Because
you're soulmates.
You should. You guys are soulmates. So anyway, the Panola pansy is much more cold hardy and heat hardy.
Which is good.
Than a regular pansy, which is good.
I don't know that I've seen them, but I don't know that I have not seen them. But if I saw them, they didn't jump out at me.
A lot of times they are called Panola XP.
I'll look for them.
Part of the XP series too. So that's my rabbit hole. I went down that because of Beth, and it was very interesting. Thank you, Beth.
Very good. Well, let's talk about our garden commissions because we're running way over again.
Of course we are.
So here it's a Halloween week, always time to start planting bulbs. I've got another order from Brent and Veggies that's due to arrive, mostly pink flowering spring flowers for the pink garden. So I hope to get all those planted, but it's got to stop raining. That's my week.
Yeah. It's supposed to rain here later this week. So I'm going to pull out, and it's not time to plant bulbs here, plant them around Thanksgiving. Pull out all of my tomato and pepper plants out of those smart pots and dump out the smart pots. And I feel like I've got time to do that now because I got most of my cuttings in the greenhouse. And I think I've brought everybody inside. I hope so. Trim up the last of the lavender because I have one section of lavender in the potager, which is a different variety, and it bloomed a little later. And so I need to shear it off because you want to keep your lavender in the soft stage and not let it get to the hard stage, because if you do that, then all bets are off.
All bets are off. Anyway, we want to thank you for listening to The Garden Angelist. If you like our podcast, please tell your friends about us. Also hit that subscribe button so you don't miss anything.
And if you listen to Apple Podcasts, we'd love a 5-star review. That helps us get noticed by others. And could you also share our podcast with your gardening friends? Word of mouth is still the best way to get the word out there.
Yes, and be sure and check out our show notes for links for more information about today's topics, plus links to our own websites. If you want to help support us, use those affiliate links. If you buy something after clicking through on them, we earn a small commission and it costs you Zippo.
And it was lovely to chat with all of you over the Garden Gate today. Bye until next week.
Bye, everybody.